respected elders, dear brothers and sisters, offering myself at the divine lotus feet of Mother Sai, a warm welcome to all of you to the 56th edition of the online Samarpan. We are today joined by a very dear brother, Mumbai's own Brother Divij Desai. But before we begin, let us invoke Bhagwan's presence by chanting 3 Omkars. Om. Om Shri Sai Ram, everyone. Once again, a warm welcome to this edition of the online Samarpan session. It is my privilege and joy to welcome to this session our very dear brother, Divij Desai. I'm sure most of us know him very well, but as my duty demands, I would like to share a brief profile of Brother Divij Desai to all of you. Brother Divij was blessed to be born in a family of Sai devotees and spent his formative years as a Balvika student and Dharmakshetra boy in Mumbai before joining the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning for the BSc Physics program at Brindavan, Whitefield in the year 2001. He then went on to pursue his MSc in Photonics from the Prashanti Nilayam campus and later, under the divine direction of Bhagwan Baba, joined the MBA program, subsequently graduating in 2008. He regards the time spent at Bhagwan's portals as the golden years of his life, having received education directly from the Divine Master. He was handpicked by Bhagwan to be a part of his entourage to Kodaikanal on 3 occasions, besides getting an opportunity to be a part of the most coveted convocation drama group for 4 years. However, among these most blessed opportunities, the one he cherishes most is the time he spent as Swami's personal servitor for 4 wonderful years. The chance to observe him in close proximity presented ample occasions to reflect on life's profound learnings in a simplified manner. After passing out from the divine portals of Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, Brother Divij worked with TCS and Citicorp for a few years and currently works with Genpact Consulting. While he's in Mumbai right now, he's usually based out of London, UK, where he stays with his wife and 2 beautiful daughters. Without further ado, I once again welcome Brother Divij to share his experiences and lessons at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Thank you so much for joining us, brother.
Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Invoking the blessings of our most beloved Bhagwan, our mother, our divine father, our Guru, our Sadguru, our Jagat Guru. My dear brothers and sisters, Jai Sai Ram to all of you. Thank you, Brother Anush, for your kind words of introduction. It feels great, and at the same time, I'm humbled as I'm able to see a lot of familiar faces on this Zoom session today as a part of Samarpan. Life almost feels as though it has taken a full circle. Going back to your intro, and you said, I spent my formative years in Mumbai. It was indeed a blessing to be born in the Sai family, because having been born in the Sai family, I did get an opportunity to be part of Swami's program, which was the Bal Vikas program. And that really helped set roots in those early formative years. As a Bal Vikas student, there were so many opportunities that we got in front of Bhagwan to be there in his presence. I also got an opportunity to be a part of Dharmakshetra. Spent a few years as Dharmakshetra boy, and eventually then a student. And there's one thing which I'm truly grateful. Time and again are these moments when I get an opportunity to speak. Primarily because every time there is such an opportunity to speak, this is also an opportunity to talk to Bhagwan. It gives me that moment, it gives me that time to lay out all my thoughts in front of Bhagwan. Again, pray and request him to accept me as I am, so that I can learn, I can live and learn what he taught us all through his life. And these moments help me to tell myself that all that you have got all this while from Bhagwan has been purely abundant blessings. And we all, in some form or shape, are blessed to be a part of this family, which we call as the Sai family. Our common blessing that we all share over here is that we have all been touched by him. As someone rightly said, that when man is born as an animal, he's born as an animal. And it is that moment when God decides to enter their life is when they get a second birth. And that initiates them into the spiritual journey. Being born in the Sai family, the spiritual journey in that sense started for me right from my childhood, having been a part of the Bal Vikas program. I remember it was the year 91 or 92, and Bhagwan had come down to Dharmakshetra. Those were the days when Bhagwan used to almost visit Dharmakshetra almost every year. And a lot of us were there at Satyadeep. There was some sort of ceremony, and Bhagwan was hoisting a tricolor. There were a few students who got the opportunity to offer tray full of flowers and chocolates to Bhagwan, and Bhagwan hoisted the tricolor, and he blessed students and he threw chocolates amongst the students. At that point in time, I felt that, wow, I'm so lucky to be there in that group of students who are so close to Swami and are getting to observe this moment from such close proximity. But it would have been great if I would have been one of those to at least, if not at least offer the tray, at least receive that chocolate, at least be a part of that group who received the chocolate, who got the chocolate from Bhagwan. Later, after a few years, Bhagwan visited Mumbai once again. And I was a part of this drama, Master the Mind to be a Mastermind. I had played the role of Fate, Bhagya. It was an abstract character, but it's instilled in me a sense of purpose in terms of how one could believe in an abstract concept and make it a pivotal moment in your life so that you find a purpose ahead. It was a small role. And at the end of the drama, Bhagwan was very happy. The drama was staged in Nehru Planetarium. And Bhagwan blessed the students and the teachers who had taught us all, the entire dramatics group. And at that point in time, I again felt that I'm so thankful to Bhagwan for giving me this opportunity, for being there in the drama troupe and getting such lovely blessings from Bhagwan. But it would have been great if one would have got a main role, if I would have got a major role, some more screen space. Then came another year. And at this time, we were a part of the entourage who presented a program at Bhagwan's lotus feet on the occasion of Ashadi Ekadashi. As we all know, Mumbai used to get that chance to present present a drama and a program in the morning of Ashadi. It was my year 11, 11 standard that I was in, and I was a part of this particular program. At that point in time, I had also started participating in Dharmakshetra as a Dharmakshetra boy. We used to go every Sunday and spend some time, be it cleaning Satyadeep, be it cleaning Shantideep, being arranging the books in the stage, some or the other work which was always there. Now, on the eve of that particular day, Ashadi Ekadashi day, I was also one of the advantages of being a part of that particular group was that you could get an opportunity to decorate the Kulwant Hall on such occasions. So it was 11:30 or 12 in the night, and we were still finishing the final stages of decoration. At that point, Nimish Bhai came and saw me and said, "Divij, what are you doing over here? You should be going and resting. Tomorrow you have an important part to play, and there's an important program." I just told him that I'm also participating and I'm also helping others set up the stage. But he said, "No, that everyone else can do. You have to go and take some rest." A bit disappointed, but then his word made sense. Went back to the shed, spent a night, came tomorrow morning, next morning, and that particular drama that we had presented was a big success. Bhagwan was very happy with all of us. We were a small group of 20 odd boys, and there were 4 odd small girls. And Bhagwan came down and he materialized Vibhuti for all of us, almost all of us. And he asked each one of us, "What are we doing? What are our names?" And it was a great moment. And at that point in time, there was one very interesting thing that happened in my life. So Swami it was the time when Swami signaled the student to start distributing prasadam, because Swami had just finished taking the photographs and then Aarti had started, and Swami called for the students to start distributing prasadam. And then the student came forward, the Swami's university student came forward and offered that tray so that Swami can start giving the drama boys. And once Swami gave all the drama boys, we all of us got prasad from Bhagwan. After that, he asked the student to drop the basket, and then he called me and he said, "Now you lift the basket." And then he went towards where the ladies were seated, again all the Maharashtra and then the Mumbai group, and he started distributing prasadam while I was holding the tray. In my mind, I was rewinding all that had happened the previous day, of me wanting to participate and me wanting to contribute all the way till 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock in the night, and that being rewarded in the form of this chance that I got at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Now with Swami, the biggest lesson that he teaches is that when you are being initiated into a spiritual life, the first thing that you've got to do is to drop all expectations. Little did I know that I was all set for this biggest lesson in my life at that tender an age. The next year, I was in my year 12th, the last year before we finished college over here in Mumbai and then apply to be in Bhagwan's university. And this time around, I was very determined to get that blessing and ask Swami for a seat in Swami's college. With what had happened the previous year, in my mind, I started building all the expectations that definitely after the program, Swami will again come down on and give us prasadam and bless us all. And that will be the moment when I will ask him to grant me a seat in his university. But this time around, the difference was that there were not 20 boys, but there were almost 100 students who had participated in that program. And after the program, Swami did come down and Swami did bless everyone. I remember brother Anush, if I'm not wrong, he also got a vibhuti from Bhagwan. And that was the moment when I thought that, okay, fine, Swami will again ask us our names and we will get that opportunity to tell him and seek his blessings and request him to fulfill our wishes. But after that, after Swami gave materialized vibhuti for brother Anush, Swami took a turn and went back to the stage. And all my expectations of having that conversation with Bhagwan instantly dematerialized. And it was a bit of a shock because little did we know that there is going to be any other opportunity after this. That one more hope that I had was that maybe Swami will call us for special darshan, but that didn't materialize either. And I was completely dejected. In my mind, I had almost lost an opportunity to get a seat in Bhagwan's college. It so happened that 2 or 3 days after the Ashadi program, we were all seated, scattered in Kulwant Hall. And Brother Prusti comes from the interview room and calls for one of the Sevadals and asks him to gather all the group of students who had come from Mumbai and Maharashtra near the garage where Swami would give them special Pad Namaskar. Those were the days when Swami used to still give us Pad Namaskars. And that is when we all of us sat over there and we were all eagerly waiting. Swami first went to the ladies section. He blessed the ladies and the Balvika students over there. And then he came to the gents section. Now, when he came to the gents section, the way I was seated, it was, in students' terminology, we call it 1.1, which means the first row, first position. And I expected that this is how Swami will start, his walk, expecting that the first person who he will bless or who he will give Pad Namaskar would be myself. Swami did come, but instead of taking the first row, he went to the last row. And he then started walking and he started blessing everyone. And then he came towards my side and I was the last but one to get Swami's blessings. But before I finished taking the Pad Namaskar, and before I could get up and ask for that request that I had and my prayer that I had in my mind and I had prepared it for a year or so, Swami had already walked past. Now this was the end of it. I had tears in my eyes and all I could do was just cry and not think of anything else in my mind. My mind had completely gone blank. Swami teaching in a very plain and a simple manner as to how one should not have expectations. That was the biggest lesson I get. But then the Lord that he is, the mastermind, the master planner that he is, and he has in his vision as to how he decides to plan things for his devotees. Swami starts walking towards the portico and then takes a turn and then walks back. To our utter surprise and amazement, he walks back and comes towards where I was seated. And then he calls me and then says, "Amy, why are you crying?" And that is the moment I tell him that, Swami, I'm wanting to get a seat in your college. And at that time, Swami corrects me and says, "Not your college, our college." And then he blesses me and he says that, "Okay, come next year, but prepare and come and you will get a seat." from the heights of making you realize that with Bhagwan, the first step when you get initiated into the spiritual journey, you have to drop your expectations. From there, he immediately sends you into transcendental bliss, giving you what he wants, because eventually he wants you to learn, he wants you to ask what he's really come for. So having learned the first lesson of spirituality, that when you are being initiated, what you do with Bhagwan is drop your expectations, not have any appointments, because as one of our lecturers used to say, that when you start having expectations with Bhagwan, you start building appointments in your mind, and those appointments lead to disappointments. So when we are preparing, when we are being initiated in this spiritual journey with our Bhagwan, the first thing that we do is drop our expectations. So when we drop our expectations, how do we then prepare for this journey? And what is our role? How do we know that, fine, if we don't have to expect from Bhagwan, what do we do? And Bhagwan very succinctly puts it that all I want you to do is to present your clean self, you as a clean slate. He doesn't want you to build expectations. He doesn't want you to have certain things in mind when you approach him. You want to approach God, you have to approach without having any expectations or without thinking what you would do. And at this point, I'm also reminded of a very, very sweet episode in which I saw in one student's life. I remember very vividly, because there used to be that phase when this student used to every day offer a letter to Bhagwan, and Bhagwan used to take his letter invariably without fail. This pattern followed for almost a month. And there was one day when this boy, he was sitting in the first row, and Swami called him. And when he came, Swami asked him, "Tumhara letter kidhar hai?" Then he said, "No, Swami, aaj maine letter nahi likha." Because the boy in his mind was thinking that now that I have been writing so often to Swami every day, and the fact that Swami is reading it and Swami is also answering my prayers, I do not need to write this letter. Incidentally, he used to write it in Mandir, and his letters used to be quite short, 2-3 liners. In fact, one such occasion, Swami also started reading his letter in front of the lecturers and the professors. And at one point, this boy pleaded Swami not to read further. But he used to just write 2-3 lines in his letter. And this one fine day, Swami calls him and says, "Where is your letter?" And he says, "Swami, I have not written a letter." And he says, No. Check your pocket. And when he checks his pocket, there was this plain page, a blank page without anything. Because he used to write every day in Mandir, when Swami used to start walking, he used to write those 2-3 lines and then give it to Bhagwan. And that was his relationship that he had formed. He used to keep that page, and that page is what Swami called for. And then Swami said to him that this is how I want you to be. I want you to come as a blank slate. When you come as a blank slate, when we go as a blank slate, piece of paper to Bhagwan, we are then ready for his mission. We are then ready to be molded in the manner in which he wants us to move, in the manner in which he wants us to work. No wonder that when he prepares us for his mission, he will take us through the grind. As Swami used to also say, that I'm like the goldsmith. For me to carve out a beautiful ornament, I have to take you through that process. I have to take you through that churn. But then if you come without expectations, if you come as a blank piece of paper, that is when your journey begins, because that is when you start following what I want you to do. Having presented ourselves without any expectations and just for Bhagwan to use in the manner in which he wants us, what's the next step on this journey? And that is where Bhagwan says that each of our journeys with him gets defined by the medium of prayer. It is prayer that we should use as a medium to form that bond with him. And when we pray to him, we have to pray that he keeps us steady on this journey. Many a times it's so very natural for us to get distracted, to get disillusioned because of all the other complexities that are running around in our lives, because of all the time that we spend in our work, in our personal lives, in our spiritual lives. There is sometimes that moment where we get confused. And that is the time when we need to pray back to Bhagwan and ask him to keep us steady on that journey. I talking about prayer and keeping oneself steady. My first year in Vrindavan, when I was studying for my for the BSc course, Bhagwan, it was the final exams, and Bhagwan was in Vrindavan, and we were preparing. The first examination that we had was English, and we were preparing for it the previous evening. Bhagwan was after Shivratri. Bhagwan had come to Vrindavan, so Bhagwan was in Trai. And in those days, we used to have a telephone booth, and if we have to speak to our parents, we had to queue up and then make calls. Or if there were calls, then there used to be a student who had a duty of being dedicated at that phone booth, and then depending on who calls, go run for that boy and then call him to attend the call. So at around 9:45, just before the night prayers, I get a message saying that your mother is on the phone and she wants you to come. So I go and I attend the call, and my mother tells me that dad has met with an accident. So I'm shocked, and I ask him, what accident was that? So my mother described it, saying it was an auto rickshaw who banged him from behind, and he's injured. Now, this was the first time when this was my first year of my time in Vrindavan, and having stayed away from my parents, getting this kind of a call just before the night on the eve of the exam. The last few words that my mother said was, just pray. So I said, okay, I will do that. And after I hang up, I get back to my room, and from that moment onwards till the next morning, when we go for darshan, I'm not able to focus on my exam. And while I was internally, I'm crying, and I'm asking Swami that, Swami, I have heard so many stories of people being in crisis, students being in crisis, devotees being in crisis. And at that point in time, you stepping into their lives and you helping them out, you finding a path for them, you stabilizing things for them. This is my moment. I am not able to focus on my exam, and all I need is this confirmation that you are there. Now, it so happened the next morning, even in students, just like how it was with the devotees, wherein you have to take a token, and depending on, you queue up and then you take a token, and then depending on the token that you get to sit in the front. Even we had that. So on that particular day, I was hoping and praying that I get the first token, but I didn't, and I got the second token. Now what happens is that students sit on the edges of the enclosure where the students are expected to sit. So that first enclosure is the one where Swami would walk. So in case if you want to wish to speak to Swami, you have to be lucky to be sitting in that first enclosure, the first row of the first enclosure. So I did not get the first token. I was sitting in the second row of the first enclosure. But it so happened that when Bhagwan came, and when Bhagwan walked around the Sai Ramesh hall, and then he came towards students, he was going towards the stage, is when he looks back, and next to me there was one more lecturer sitting over there, and he knew, because I had spoken to him while I was sitting and waiting for Bhagwan's darshan. He knew what had happened, so he just gave me some space to come a bit forward. And at that point in time, I make that eye contact with Bhagwan, and I get up and I tell him that Swami, my father met with an accident. And immediately Swami materializes Vibhuti and gives it to me and says, don't worry, there is no fracture. Now, at that point in time, it all made sense. The entire aspect of how one should pray, how and when Bhagwan decides to enter our lives, and how and why Bhagwan decides to enter our lives. It all made sense at that point in time. But the fact that he straight away tells me what I want to hear is something that defines our Bhagwan. Because he knows what is going on in our mind. He knows what do we want. He knows why do we need it. And that is why that element, that bond, that medium of prayer is the one which we need to keep strong and consistent with him. Once we get into that phase where we are building our journey with him, where prayer forms that constant companionship, the next phase that Bhagwan says that one should get into is the pining for him. There's a difference between prayer and pining. Prayer is when you pray, when you need Bhagwan. Sometimes you also pray in your good times, you also pray in your not good times. But the aspect of pining for the Lord takes us a step further, where we now start wanting Bhagwan. I have a very vivid memory of an episode in my life in my third year undergraduate. We used to have a course where it used to be about Swami's teachings, Swami's Vahinis, and Bhagwan and his mission and his purpose in life. And it was one of those sessions where our teacher asked us, we were in our third year, so we were finally graduating out of the Vrindavan campus, and it was towards the end, and this lecturer asked us, he casually asked us, saying, students, now that you are finishing the 3 years of your curriculum in Vrindavan campus, do you think, what do you think is the most coveted event or episode from your lives? And what is it that you will cherish and go back when you get back home, or when you pass out and when you pursue your higher education? So many students started giving responses. Someone said, I really wanted to sing in front of Bhagwan. And eventually in my third year, I got an opportunity. I really wanted to play a musical instrument in front of Bhagwan, and I got an opportunity to play tabla. But somehow the lecturer wasn't convinced or wasn't pleased with these answers. He was looking for something more. And then he himself said that in these 3 years of your life that you have spent over here, if you have had an experience of Bhagwan, be it his invisible hand or be Bhagwan in person, then you could consider your 3 years of your stay in Vrindavan as successful. And you will take back that memory and you will cherish it for the rest of your life. And that will be the basis of your subsequent relationship with Bhagwan. If you don't have it, ask for it. There were hardly few weeks left into our examinations, our final examinations. And for some reason, despite having that episode where, Bhagwan blessed me with Vibhuti Prasadam for my father who had met an accident, there was this innate urge within me, very intense urge within me, that Bhagwan, I do want that kind of an experience. I do want an experience where it was not a fact that there were doubts within my mind as to whether, about Bhagwan's divinity, or there were doubts about, about our relationship with Bhagwan, but it was just that intense urge to ask for that experience. Probably I could probably relate it to the fact as to how the lecturer got it in front of us. Maybe I could dedicate it to that. But at that moment, I had it in my mind that, Swami, I want this experience. And I started asking for it. And every night in my prayers, I used to ask Swami, Swami, I want that experience. I want that experience. Now, it had so happened that in my third year, I had undertaken physics uh, in my third year. And there was one subject called quantum mechanics. For some reason, I was not really familiar and I was not very friendly. That subject wasn't really friendly to me. Now, what had happened was that was the year when Bhagwan was asking students to put up a lot of dramas, a lot of street plays, we used to call it, right in front of Bhagwan's stage in the Kulwant Hall. Practically every class had put up a drama from the Prashanti campus. So we get a call, our warden gets a call from Prashanti and says, Swami is asking if the Vrindavan boys can put up a program. And because we were the third year, we were the year that was passing out, the warden asked us whether whether your batch and your group wishes to put up a program. And we happily accepted it and we prepared for it. Many days went into the preparation, and all of this was just few days before before our exams were to begin. So it was 4 days before our exams were to begin that we had gone to Prashanti Nilayam and we had presented this play in front of Bhagwan. Swami was very happy. And I also remember that, we had one of the brothers had composed a song. It was a very emotional song because Swami had not come to Vrindavan. And usually the trend used to be that after Shivratri, Swami immediately comes to Vrindavan. And this was many weeks after Shivratri that Swami had not come. So the song that he had composed was literally asking and calling and pining for Swami to come to Vrindavan and spend the time with boys. So the entire batch, the entire class sang that. And Swami was moved to tears and Swami was very happy. And there were a couple of boys who went with pens in their tray. And Swami blessed the boys. Swami, and while he was blessing that tray, which was full of pens, Swami said, everyone will do well, everyone will pass, and I will come immediately after your exams. That really made us all very happy. The fact that Bhagwan said very clearly that he will come immediately after our exams. Our exams were to end on 31st of March. And Bhagwan did come on 31st of March to Vrindavan. Now the story had just started for me. So we came back to Vrindavan. We were all overjoyed. We were all very glad that we had a great time presenting the program to Bhagwan. And Bhagwan also blessed us and he promised us that he will come at the end of March after our exams. And 4 days after that, our exams were to begin. And the first examination that I had was quantum mechanics. Now, sorry to say, but I had done very poorly in that particular exam. To such an extent that I kept that examination paper with me all through my summer vacation. And every evening, I used to go and I used to calculate that if the examiner, if the one who is correcting my paper were to be extremely liberal, then I will surely cross 40. But if the examiner were to be a bit strict, then I think my time's up and I might not cross. And because it was the third year, the way it works is that you are in the last semester. You have to pass your last semester to go and join the Prashanti campus for your master's program. If you don't pass in the last semester, the 6th semester, as we call it, then you got to spend a year away from Bhagwan's portals and then maybe join next year. And it was a very, very difficult time. Now, at that time, with this in my mind, I called up my parents one day and I said that I have to stay back in Vrindavan the entire vacation because I think these are my last 2 months. And I want to spend as much time as I want with Bhagwan. And I used to try finding opportunity to speak to him or tell him that, Swami, this is what has happened. But I never got a chance. One thing which I remember I used to do was every evening after darshans, when the stores and everything is shut, I used to go to the second floor of the store's building and then do this math of how much will I get? Will I cross 40? Will I not cross 40? And then end up eventually crying. It so happened that it was the month of June, and our results come just towards June, so that we get to know as to who has cleared and who will join the Prashantilam campus. So just around June, we get the results, and I am successful. I pass, and I joined the Prashantilam campus, and I was extremely overjoyed. But the story was not stopping there. Come Dasera time, just before Dasera, Swami calls. We are all seated in the bhajan hall, and then Swami, I was sitting behind the bhajan boys, and then Swami calls me towards his throne and asks me, "Kya padhta hai?" So I said, "Swami, I'm doing physics." I was in my first year masters. Physics like karta hai? I said, "Yes, Swami, I like physics." And then Swami said, "Exams kaisa gaya?" We had just finished our first semester, mid semester, or the end semester, and I had done pretty well in the exams as per what I thought. So I told Swami that, "Yes, Swami, it was very well. Your grace, Swami, and it all went very well. Thank you, Swami." And I bent down to take blessings. And then Swami held my shoulder and said, "Par last year, ek exam tumne acha nahi kiya." And immediately it stuck to me that, okay, Swami is talking about the quantum mechanics paper. And then Swami said, "Every day rota hai, pass hoga, nahi hoga, nahi hoga, nahi hoga. Faith aata hai, jata hai, aata hai, jata hai, aata hai, jata hai. You didn't pass, but Swami gave you grace marks, and that's why you passed." I had only tears in my eyes, and with that amazement, I just could not say anything. All I could do was take his blessings, go back to my seat, and at the end of that session, that day, just rewind and work back on that entire aspect of pining for the Lord, of wanting to be with him, of wanting to be near and dear him. Was that what eventually gave me this experience? Was that what eventually gave me what I wanted, which I just inadvertently asked for an experience? But that, dear brothers and sisters, what that was, that moment for me, which cleared in my head that if at all there is any future that needs a design, you have to rest it with the master, because the master has pretty much sorted it for you. That was that moment which we all have in our lives, where Bhagwan gives you that clarity, that belief, that faith, where it is abundantly clear that from here on, it is the master who is the Sutradhar, and we are just his puppets. So when we prepare ourselves by presenting a clean, a pure slate of ourselves, pray that we are constantly with him, and we are not wavered, we are not distracted in this journey, and we pine for him. What is that next phase that comes on this spiritual journey with Bhagwan? That phase which then presents itself before us. It is the phase of challenges. Because as Bhagwan says that, he's like the goldsmith who wants to prepare you. He has to take us through the challenges. Without challenges, there is no growth, there is no progress. Right from the time we are born, we humans, we are made to prepare and surpass those challenges. And in the same spiritual journey with Bhagwan, we have to go through the challenges. We have to go through those difficult moments, which then prepare us for what's coming next. So what are these challenges that we go through? And in my limited understanding of the challenges that one goes through as a sadhaka, is our ability and our involvement in the work that we do. We all do work for Bhagwan, and Swami many a times has said very clearly that not just Swami's work, whatever work you are doing, treat it as Bhagwan's work. Treat it as though, Swami is going to come and inspect it, because that is when you will put in that 100%. And when you do that work, you do it with perfection, because in that perfected work is what lies the purified form of your surrender and your devotion to him. When you try to give yourselves complete dedication, is where you can say that, Swami, I have done my best, and now it's up to you to accept it. And Bhagwan himself was the greatest embodiment of teaching that aspect to us. I remember there was once, after Dashera, Swami wanted to give the priest who did the yagnam for those 9 days. Swami wanted to bless them, and Swami wanted to give Angavastram and Dhoti. So we were there with Bhagwan in the interview room, and we were packing those Angavastram and Dhoti in packets and putting it in the bag ready for Bhagwan to give. So we were folding them, and it was all ready, and we were all set to open the door and come out with Bhagwan so that Bhagwan can start distributing. And just when we were about to do that, Swami stopped us and he said, 1 minute, open that packet, one of the packets. He asked us to open one of the packets. And then when we opened that packet, one of the Angavastrams was not folded properly. Now, Swami asked us to fold that. We redid that, we refolded that Angavastram and then put it back into the packet, and then we went outside. It would have been very simple, and for Swami to just go and give it to the priest, and the priest would have heartily accepted it without any complaint or without any feeling that this was an unfolded Angavastram. But at that moment, Bhagwan chose to teach a couple of us who were there in the room a lesson, that when you are doing any work, whether be it folding an Angavastram or a dhoti, or whatever work that you do in your lives, you have to bring that perfection. Because when you make it perfect in your ability, that is when you purify that work. And when you purify that work, it becomes Bhagwan's work. It is then Bhagwan's, you then leave it to Bhagwan, and the rest is Bhagwan's responsibility for it to be a success or for it to be a failure. Another important aspect that we have to learn and we have to develop within ourselves when we go through these challenges, which happens in every sadhaka's life, is that constant reminder of Bhagwan being the doer and Bhagwan being the beneficiary. And there are again so many moments where, while we get involved in our work, there is that tiny moment or tiny thread where the doership comes in, where we start feeling that, okay, the success of this work or the failure of this work is all our responsibility. Yes, we have to be responsible, but while we are executing the task, we have to keep reminding that I'm not the doer, I'm just being the instrument. It was and to outlay this further, I would like to remind myself and also narrate this episode, which is very, very dear to me, because it was just that me and another student had started serving Bhagwan. And one of the difficulties that we had started facing at that point in time was Bhagwan was on the sofa chair or the car chair, the car chair that used to come out from Swami's chair, from his car, and then we had to wheel it. Now, it was one of those days where when we entered the interview room, and I was pretty low on confidence, I was pretty down. And Swami asked me, Amy, what happened? And I initially could not tell Swami. I was fearing in my mind that if I tell Swami that, Swami, I'm not very confident, or I'm making mistakes in wheeling, I sometimes make a mistake in wheeling you towards a section where you don't want to go or where you want to take a turn. In my mind, I was having all this running and telling my own self that if I were to tell that to Swami, then Swami might think that, okay, fine, then he can possibly be rested. So I just kept mum and I said, no, Swami, it's fine, all good. Little did I know that, whom am I trying to hide from? Bhagwan knows us through and through. So Bhagwan still insisted and asked me, no, say what happened. And then I mustered some courage and I said to Swami that, Swami, I am feeling a little sad and little low on confidence because I'm making mistakes. And I'm very sorry for that. And Swami looked at me and he said, as though all of this was not at all required. And then Swami said, he beautifully narrated the episode from Hanuman's life in Ramayana. When Hanuman was tasked, and Swami said this, when Hanuman was tasked to get Sanjeevani, Hanuman also felt the same. Hanuman also didn't know whether he will be able to cross this ocean and go and get that Sanjeevani for him. And at that point in time, Lord Rama tells Hanuman that when the Lord decides to give you some work, the Lord will also give you the strength to finish and complete that work. So have that faith in him, because it is the Lord who is the doer and the Lord himself who is the beneficiary. That episode and those words from Bhagwan completely changed my view in the way I carried on my duty from then on. It innately instilled that confidence that now on, it is not you who's making the mistake. It is not you who is doing it, because you are just being there as one of the students who is blessed to get that opportunity. The ultimate doer is Bhagwan. And when Bhagwan is doing, there is no mistake. Bhagwan knows what he is doing. So that aspect of reminding ourselves that we are not the doers, we are not the beneficiaries, and it is just the Lord, helps us surpass the challenges and overcome them, because that will keep us grounded, and that will again keep the responsibility of the execution and its success with Bhagwan. While we do this, while we face through these challenges, it is extremely important that we keep that faith and we keep that surrender. We surrender to him and we keep that faith in him. Again, I'm reminded of a beautiful episode. There were many times when Swami used to come into the interview room and just start reading letters. And then there were occasions when Swami used to obviously call people for interview and spend time with them. But there were those days when Swami used to just come to the interview room and just while we were doing the Path Seva, ask us to ask a question. And those were the best days, because at that time, while you are serving Bhagwan, while you are performing your duty, you also get an opportunity to learn directly from the Sakshat Bhagwan himself and get that message, which then remains for your lifetime. So one of the co-brothers who was also serving happened to ask Swami, Swami, what comes first? Is it faith or is it experience? Is it the faith that drives an experience, or is it the experience that instills the faith in Bhagwan, and then one becomes a true devotee of Lord? And we were both expecting that Swami has to say either of the two. But Swami beautifully said, it is love that should come first. If you have love, faith will develop. And if there is faith, an experience is bound to come. So Bhagwan made it, and the look in his eyes at that point in time when he said that it was bound to come, it said it all. That it is this journey with Bhagwan that you have to have that love, that unconditional surrender for him will build that faith in him. And that will bring that experience, because the experience follows the faith. The Lord himself is not bound to love. He is not bound at all. But because of his nature to love, he just loves and he keeps giving that love. Many a times he has told students and devotees that all he expects in that sense, that very little from us, is if we are able to replicate, or if we are able to live even an ounce of how he has loved us, that will do for us. The last few stages of this journey that we are on, the spiritual journey that we all got initiated on, the moment Bhagwan decided to come into our lives, as it grows and as it grows in its stages of evolution, we reach that stage of sacrifice. And that aspect of sacrifice, which Bhagwan many a time has said, that in any journey of a sadhaka, if he is not able to experience the attribute of sacrifice, if he's not able to sacrifice, then that journey remains unfulfilled. Because it is only when you sacrifice, you are able to take it a notch higher, and you are able to then experience divinity in its purest form. Na karmana na tyage neke amrutatva manasuhu. Bhagwan has said, the Vedas said, immortality is not attained through action, progeny, or wealth. It is attained only via sacrifice. And the best phase and the best part of watching Bhagwan through those close quarters is his own ability to demonstrate sacrifice. There were a couple of incidents which definitely comes to my mind straight away, of having learned how Bhagwan himself demonstrated what sacrifice means. Was once when it was in Kodaikanal, and it was raining, and it was quite cloudy, and because of it being a hill station, there was a little temperature, as you can call it, that Bhagwan had developed. So despite all that, there were still one of those evening sessions. The devotees had still come, and they were still gathered in Sai Shruti, and they were all waiting for Bhagwan. It was around evening, after snacks, after the tiffin that Bhagwan had, was when Bhagwan used to step out for darshan, and then eventually go to the bhajan hall for the bhajans. I could see it very much, that with all this weather, with all the rain, and with all of this, I could see that Bhagwan was still wanting to go and bless his devotees. Bhagwan was still wanting to go and give darshan. Now it so happened that Swami happened to ask a few senior devotees as to what is the weather like outside. And all of them in their mind had the same urge and the opinion to try positioning the weather outside in a manner which potentially may discourage Bhagwan. We were all, everyone could possibly play that in their mind, that maybe the description of the weather that we might give might discourage Bhagwan, and instead of going out for darshan, Swami might straight go to the bhajan hall, and we might just have the bhajans. Swami heard all of them, and then Swami went towards the door. And at that point in time, I was next to Bhagwan. And again, that Maya Swarup that Bhagwan is, that he takes you through that, he makes you experience that, so that you go through it to realize that this is the same Bhagwan, the Sakshat Bhagwan. He also has Maya to him. And for you to learn that, you got to remind that not to be fooled by that Maya. He creates these situations where he tests you. So for some reason, I also felt that maybe I should also take the stance of Bhagwan, of the seniors, the senior devotees, who just had tried to influence Bhagwan not to step out in Sai Shruti, in the darshan, for the people who are outside. So when Swami was just in at the entrance, I stood up, I went near Swami's ears, and I said the same thing, that Swami, the bhajan hall, we can just take a left and we can go straight into the bhajan hall. Just raining outside. Is that a plan? And Swami looked into my eyes and he said, Nur musko, which means shut up. If you don't want to come, you can sit over there. Straight away, I was grounded. Didn't have any words to say after that. So Bhagwan went out, stood there for some time in the balcony of Sai Shruti for roughly 5 to 10 minutes, and then went inside bhajan hall. And in my mind, I was going through this. Firstly, I was definitely reprimanding and chiding myself as to giving that suggestion, thinking that that's it. Maybe I have spoiled the rest of my Kodai trip. Luckily for me, that Kodai trip, Swami still kept talking. So it didn't really endanger my Kodai trip in that sense. But the lesson that he taught us at that time was that for Swami, his devotees are everything. What happens to his body, what is going through his body, is something which is secondary or even tertiary. And that is the element, the aspect of sacrifice that he wants us to learn. That you have to keep yourself last. You have to keep the society first. You have to keep others next. And then you have to keep yourself last. One more episode I very vividly remember, and that really was a hair-raising episode for me because I could see it sitting right next to him. It was 2005 when Bhagwan had just had a fall, and Bhagwan had a fractured right arm. And it was Buddha Purnima. And there were thousands of devotees who had gathered inside Ramesh Hall. And until that day, I had never seen Swami give a discourse while he's sitting. All my memories of Swami giving discourses was always when Swami stands up and then he gives a discourse. I had never seen Bhagwan give a discourse while he's sitting on the chair. But that day, because Swami, 10 days prior to that, when Swami had the injury, everyone possibly thought that Bhagwan is going to give a discourse for the first time, seated on his sofa, seated on his chair, and then he will grant a discourse. So there was a program that was put up, and after the program got over, Bhagwan called for the podium, called for the mic. The mic was arranged. And then since everyone expected, including the audio video students who set up the arrangement, who arranged for the mics for Bhagwan, even they kept the mic at a position where it could just reach Swami's lips while he was seated. And then Swami looked at me and he gestured me to support him from back so that he can get up and speak. And when he got up, there was thunderous applause and people were in tears to see Bhagwan with an injured arm get up and then give a talk. And Bhagwan spoke for roughly 40-45 minutes, after which he sat and then he called for the Aarti and then the program got over. That for me was a first-hand episode of how Bhagwan could go to any lengths to demonstrate that sacrifice is his nature. And not just demonstrate doing sacrifices, sacrificing his own body or sacrificing himself, but also making others learn around him that you have to keep yourself last. You have to think about others, because that is what will inculcate that attribute of sacrifice, which is certainly needed as we grow and as we transcend into the levels of spirituality that Bhagwan has himself initiated upon us. And the ultimate form or the ultimate step of this journey that we have all been initiated upon is our ability to accept whatever happens in our lives. Ability to accept everything that happens, positive, negative, with equal gratitude. As someone would call it Sthita Prajna, wherein you are immobile to that state, eh, happiness or joy, everything means the same to you. It is a difficulty, and that is why it is the last stage, or it is the penultimate stage before which we can truly say that yes, we are truly following the spiritual journey with Bhagwan. Because when we reach that stage, when we come to that stage wherein we accept everything that Bhagwan does with us, everything that happens in our lives with equal gratitude, is where we have accepted his will, his plan, his mission, and our role in it as being mere puppets of this divine creation. I would like to narrate one episode before I conclude, which is very, very dear again. Is it? I don't remember the year, maybe 2007 or 2006, but it was after bhajans when Bhagwan had just asked Anil Kumar sir to announce that Swami is going to come and give darshan to everyone outside. And it did not really mean, it was just after darshan, it was just after bhajans. So all of us were a bit confused when Swami got that announcement made as to what does it mean, by Swami is going to come and give darshan outside. But so is his leelas. We have to just accept, and we have just to witness what the plan was. So Anil Kumar sir made that announcement, and after that Swami stepped out of Yajur Mandir, and then he got into his car, and then the car drove towards the hostel. From the hostel, it drove further, and when we neared the airport, Swami said, "Okay, let's get inside the airport." Now, by that time, when we had gathered, because this message had been announced, there were thousands of devotees from the nearby villages, from the nearby towns and villages of Puttaparthi, who had gathered, and they were all there at the airport. And when Swami's car reached the airport, it was just one car, no lights. We were all on the tarmac, and the only light that was there was coming out of Swami's car. And with 5 to 10,000, roughly 5 to 7,000 odd people around. In other words, it was a little chaotic. But Swami had said that I'm going to give darshan to everyone, to such an extent that in the university, in the hostel, students were told that if you want to have this darshan, you have to go to the terrace. So all the students were there on the terrace of the building, and we were all waiting, and students were all waiting for the darshan. Now, for about 1.5 hours, we just stood at the tarmac. And then after that, Swami said, I think Brother Satyajit was driving the car, and he said, let's turn around and let's get back to the mandir. And it was around 9:30, that late in the night, that we reached mandir. And after we reached mandir, we were blessed to have a few of us who were serving Bhagwan were blessed to have dinner with him. And there was payasam that Swami had on the plate. And when we had the payasam, after we had the payasam, one of the brothers told Swami, Swami, we are very thankful for this opportunity, and we're very, very happy to get this chance with you. And then Swami said, the satisfaction that you have got by eating that payasam with Bhagwan, and that giving you that fulfillment, that is the kind of satisfaction, that is the kind of fulfillment that all of those other devotees, the villagers, the people who were there, who could not otherwise come every day to Bhagwan, to Prashanti Nilayam and have darshan, but that very moment when I was there in the airport, that is the satisfaction, that is the fulfillment that they have received. And in my mind, it was again exams time. So the next day we had an exam, and I was running all of this in my mind, that there is an exam, and I was hoping, after darshan, after bhajans, get back, prepare for it. But then we go, Swami makes this announcement, We go to the airport and we come back at 9:45, and then Bhagwan gives us this message. The initial few hours, I was a bit confused that I was telling myself that I'm sure Swami knows that, we have an exam tomorrow, so Swami will give us that time. But there is certainly a purpose as to why he has, made this announcement, and why are so many people over here. And that got later answered through that simple message that Swami gave by just giving us that payasam and telling that the fulfillment that you got by having that payasam, that is the kind of fulfillment that the people over there who have got by just seeing me, which otherwise in everyday routine, they don't get to see me at that close distance, at that close quarters. So to accept whatever Swami does with you, whatever happens around Swami's, whatever happens around our lives, and relate it back to Bhagwan and say that, okay, this is his will, this is his gift, is that ultimate step that we have to take, because that is when we truly surrender, and then he is the one who is the director of our lives. The last few words that I would like to say, in this journey that we all are, is that there have been 3 moments in all our lives which have been very, very poignant, very, very significant. One was when Swami had a fall, and we all, for once in our lifetime, prayed only for Swami's health and not for anything else. And that was that big change that had happened in our lives, because never ever before, we would have, Swami's health was always in pristine conditions, but there was that fall that had happened, and then there was that period where across the globe, whether be it Sai Gayatri, be it any other form of prayer, we are all praying for Bhagwan's health. There was that occasion, there was that episode in our lives where there was so much of unity in all our prayers. The second one was when Swami took Samadhi. And again, at that point in time, we all shared that common sorrow of not being able to see Swami in physical presence. And then the third one was when what happened in March 2020, and the entire globe, went through the COVID saga. While we speak, we went through, we are hoping and praying that this is past, and we hope and pray that it does not really again arise and endanger lives in that effect in the future. But it was that moment again where all through the globe, all of us were locked, and by default, Bhagavan used to tell us that, try to go deeper within, try to see your path within, go inward. And this is when he made it. He enforced us that we are locked inside our homes, and at least then we get that opportunity to go deeper. I think we have to be really grateful. Each of these episodes in our lives have really been quite significant and have taught us the highest form of truth that Bhagwan wanted all of us to learn. And now that we are, I think the greatest gift, or I think the most least of the offering that we can give to Bhagwan is to at least try replicating one aspect of him, be his politeness, be his kindness, be his ability to love, be his ability to sacrifice. If we are able to mirror at least one aspect of Bhagwan, then I'm sure Bhagwan would be extremely overjoyed and happy that we are making that progress that he all wants us to make on this spiritual journey that he has all initiated us upon. With these few words, I thank again the organizers of Samarpan to give me this opportunity to share my thoughts, and again share that opportunity and get that opportunity to talk to Bhagwan, to talk to all of us, and pray on behalf of all of us that Bhagwan gets us closer and closer with every passing day. Jai Sai Ram.
Thank you. Thank you so much, brother. So we have opened up the chat window for the attendees to share their questions. But brother, if I may ask one question, going back to the Ashadi experience of 2000. I very vividly remember seeing the yearning in your face, and like you put it, the pining for Bhagwan in your eyes, in your expression. It was so evident. And probably that there was a part of it in all of us. But how do we continue to pine for Swami and pine for Bhagwan even in his physical absence?
No, great question, Brother Anush. And I think, very, quite obvious in that sense that it was easy to certain extent when Bhagwan was there in his physical presence, because in all our lives, there was always that time where one could say that, okay, fine, I'm having difficulties. I need to rush down to Prashanti. And that was the solace for us. And in today's times, while Bhagwan in his physical presence is not in Prashanti, but I think there is one gift that Bhagwan has given us. And I feel probably if that is something which we are able to, put in our minds and accept it and, mull over it, it might significantly help us. Swami always used to say that it is his will that he decides who comes, who is with him, who is around him, and who is away from him physically, right? And many of us would have experienced that, even when we sometimes when we wanted to really visit Prashanti, we may not have been able to do so, or things wouldn't have gone per plan, because Swami was the one who used to pull the strings. I think that still, at a macrocosmic level, it still remains the truth. It is his will which decides everything that happens in every one of our lives. But for a moment, I think the tables have turned to such an extent that now it is completely upon us how much we want him. Because today, if we want him more, then we dwell more upon him, we think more of him, we try to dedicate more time, be it in our bhajan, be it Swami's namasmarana, be it Swami's work, be it our own work, but try to establish that identity with him, that okay, Swami is there in everything that I'm doing, or in every part of and walk of my life that I'm living. So you have now, for that opportune moment, you have that ability to now decide. The day you decide that, okay, fine, I want to be on my own, that is your call. But at least for once in our lifetime, we have been given, Swami has given the baton to us and said that, you decide how much you want me, and I will make sure that I will come to you when you really need me.
Very powerful, very powerful. Thank you for that. So, is there any experience that you could share post Bhagwan's Mahasamadhi, of his divine presence, omnipotence, omnipresence?
Definitely, and this I think one of the biggest boons that I would really say I have, and blessing I have received, and I'm sure many of us, who are on this session have also been blessed, is the fact that after all of that happened, after Swami's Mahasamadhi, and then there were so many other incidents that happened, and then there were some different organizations that were set up, and then some issues. We are, and this is from a personal note as well, I have still managed not to get distracted by anything of that sort. And I think I count that as a very big blessing. And coming back to the earlier point that I was saying, that the prayer to keep telling Swami that, okay, I don't want to be distracted, I want to be on the journey and keep my focus on. I think that is something which really has been my big blessing. And I have felt like many a times when someone has talked about that subject, or someone has asked for thoughts on that subject, the ability to simply cut that subject off and then retain the focus towards what you want to keep with Swami, your journey, that one-on-one journey that we have with Bhagwan has been, I would say, the biggest blessing that I have received after Swami has gone. Because it could have been very easy, to get, everybody wants to know, everybody wants to talk, everybody wants to ask opinions. I think everybody wants to ask opinions because everyone wants to know what is your view versus what is their view, and try to compare and then see where we stand. But the ability to stay away from it and then just be focused towards Bhagwan's journey that he has already set for all of us, I think I would consider that as my biggest blessing after Bhagwan's physical samadhi.
The next question is a very nice one, and something that even I would like to hear the answer. What is what important message do you feel we must share? As gurus, what is the important lesson that we should share with the Balvika's children today? Because I don't think any of the Balvika's children had the opportunities that you had or I had, to be with Swami in person. So, what is this message that we should share?
Again, great question, Brother Anush, and I really thank whosoever has asked that question. I would like to narrate what happened once in Kodai, and I think I would take my learnings from there, and I think it is the same for every Balvika student. Ultimately, we are all Sai students. Yes, some of us have gone through Bhagwan's university, studied, pursued education over there. Some of us have gone through the Balvikas, which is again Satsang integral education. And then some of us have been devotees, and as a devotee, we are also a student of Bhagwan because he is teaching us, and we are trying to grow and develop on that journey. So coming back to this Kodai episode, it was the last day of our stay in the Kodai trip, and everyone was very overwhelmed. After having spent 3 odd weeks with Bhagwan, you are very overwhelmed with emotions because it is not the same. Once you're staying from the time you are spending 8 to 10 hours in physical presence with Bhagwan. For all the students who were there in Kodai, everyone knows that once Swami gets back to Vrindavan or Prashanti, Swami gets back to their routine, and then all the students will go and sit where they sat just before the Kodai trip. So everybody is very, very emotionally charged on that day. And Bhagwan was asking everyone. And some of the students were also graduating out. So some of the students whom Bhagwan had taken were also completing their master's, MBA or MTech. So there was once a student, and Swami asked him, what do you intend to do? What do you want to do after, going back? And Swami, and he said, and he was quite overwhelmed, and he started crying, and he said, Swami, I want to be the change agent. I want to be the one who, spreads your message, and I want to be the one who is responsible for changing and bringing transformation in the society. And Swami looked at him, smiled at him, gave him blessings, and then Swami held his own hair, and he said, I have seen these many boys say the same thing. All I want you to do is not to change the world or transform the society. Just don't change yourself. I want you to be like how you have been, when you were in your Balvikas or when you have been in a student. I want you to retain that. If you can retain that, ante chalu. That is enough for me. So I think that is it applies to everyone. If we are able to retain that identity that we have received from Bhagwan, be it a student, be it a devotee, be it a Balvika student, I think if that does not change within us, then I think it's the biggest blessing.
Fantastic. I think that's such a powerful message, and I don't think it's something that we have heard so far. Probably the last question for the evening, because it's almost 8 p.m. Indian time. Please tell us how we can become loving like Bhagwan.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is again a great question, and I guess many a times we tend to make ourselves believe that Bhagwan could love like that because he was Bhagwan, right? And we are humans, and that's why all of this entire relationship of we looking up to him, we bowing to him, and then we praying to him because he was Bhagwan, so he can do certain things, and we can do only X number of things. And I think again, being blessed to see Bhagwan at close quarters, um, there was that underlying current where he was always trying to through his discourses, through his interviews, through his one-on-one messages, personal messages, Bhagwan kept telling people and trying to reflect that aspect that divinity is within you as well. You can also be the same divine that I am. We just needed that consistent approach in our own minds that yes, even I am divine, and that's why I need to start reflecting and start exhibiting the qualities that the divine had, and trying to increase the number of such activities and events in our life will eventually help us reach that stage. So if we were to live in that space wherein we say that okay, this is something which Bhagwan can do, this is something that the divine can do, and we can only do this much, we will always keep that gap. So telling yourself that yes, I am also divine, and and all I need to do is to start practicing. Yeah, and again, for us to realize that aspect of divinity is going to be a journey, and that is why that entire journey is, and that is why Swami also said that it is only the human who gets that opportunity during his lifetime to be born as an animal, but possibly go back as divine, because he gets that chance, he gets that opportunity wherein he can go through different emotions, when he can go through different experiences, where he can gauge that, or where he can decide that this is divine and this is not. And if he's able to try adopting that aspect of divinity, of love, of sacrifice, that will eventually get us there.
Thank you. I think there's just one more question that's come in, like the last minute, and that is related to what you just said. That's why we can include it. How easy or difficult is it to walk on the path of values set by Swami in today's world?
Again, great question. And I think this is a journey for all of us, myself, all of us who are there on this forum, on the session, and the world outside. I think it is definitely easy to start with, because as Swami says, right, when you come into class 1, the examination, the syllabus for class 1 is very easy. But as you go to year 2, year 3, year 10, and then the difficult parts come in. So the journey to start with is very easy, and the journey gets difficult and challenging as we progress. Now over there, what Swami does is, and this is something that I would say that I've seen it and also experienced to a certain extent. If we are able to keep that company with him, telling ourselves that yes, Swami, now comes the most difficult part. So it's almost like in a corporate, you make preparations for the presentation, but eventually when you are about to present, you obviously anticipate some of the questions as well, but then there will be some questions which you have not anticipated, and you got to answer that. So at that moment, you tell Swami, you tell Bhagwan that Bhagwan, eventually you have to be there, because I have dedicated my work, I have dedicated my actions, and if at all I have to pass out successfully out of this, you are the one who has to take care. We have to keep doing that as we go through this phase. So when we find it difficult, we have to keep him aside. When we find it easy as well, we have to thank him, because we have to realize that he's the one who is helping us through the journey, because that is the purpose of his avataric mission, that he wants us to go through that journey so that one day we are able to realize that he and us, we were one and the same. So he has to be there. And it is us who keep reminding ourselves and who keep holding on to him, which will help us to then eventually overcome and successfully cross that journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And coming from our own very own Dharmakshetra boy, I think these words ring even truer than and hit closer to our hearts. So just wrapping today's this wonderful evening that we have shared with Brother Divij. I mean, he spoke. He very beautifully took us through the journey to the Lord, with the Lord, starting with the need to drop expectations, approaching God as a clean slate, forming a bond with Him through the medium of prayer, and going beyond prayer and pining for the Lord. Of course, by His grace, facing and overcoming the challenges that He throws our way, and surrendering doership on the way through love, faith, and experience. And above all, being willing to sacrifice and accepting everything with equanimity. I think this beautiful journey, and then ultimately reaching Him and being one with Him and truly calling ourselves His devotees, followers, bhaktas, what have you. So thank you so much, Brother Divij. It's a real emotional and spiritual pleasure listening to all the wonderful experiences that you shared and all the thoughts and lessons that you have put before us. It will, of course, take us some time to ruminate on this and think about this. For all those present here, this beautiful session will also be available on YouTube very, very shortly. So thank you all for joining, and thank you once again, dear brother, for agreeing to be a part of this. And of course, our heartfelt gratitude to Bhagwan for making this wonderful event possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Anush.
We will end this evening with a prayer that Bhagwan blesses everyone, everywhere with joy and peace. Samasta loka
sukhino bhavantu. Samasta loka sukhino bhavantu.
Samasta loka sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Jai Sai Ram.